Hi, it's Elaine, and this is Tales of an Entrepreneur, where we discover not only what entrepreneurs do, but why they do it. With any success comes setbacks and challenges. And in this podcast, I want to uncover those life changing events or those significant crossroad moments which change the course of how my guests run their business. We all face hard times, and I hope to discover the knowledge they apply to their highly successful business and what advice they can share with us today. Today's guest is Claire Taylor Foster. Now, when Claire sent me a summary for her career today, I just couldn't wait to get to recording day and find out so much more. Claire has had several different careers and worked for some of the biggest businesses in the UK. Claire started out in retail, then moved to London to work for an advertising agency and also an architect's. Claire then moved back to Sheffield to work on the build of Meadowhall, one of the biggest shopping centres in England. Claire retrained and became a clinical therapist before changing careers some years later, delivering training courses and then moving into interior design to finally end up where she is now, running her own successful copywriting business, Raspberry Flamingo. I mean, wow, what an incredible career and a huge, huge welcome to this show, Claire.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot about the retail bit.
So, I mean, there's so much to chat over there. I mean, you've had such an interesting and varied career. I'd be interested to know about the driving force between some of the changes, and I'm sure you hit a few bumps along the road.
Yeah,
So let's start at
I,
the beginning.
I think the issue for me was that I wanted to, growing up in teens, I wanted to be an interior designer. Changing rooms had just hit the TV screens for people
Yeah.
that are old enough to remember changing rooms. And I
Yes.
wanted to be Linda Barker. I just wanted to be Linda Barker. And the nearest course was Manchester. And
Yeah.
I lived at the time, about 10 miles out of Sheffield. So
Okay.
I would have had to go into Sheffield to get a train to Manchester every day and
Yeah.
come back. And basically, my mum said no. She said I couldn't do it. So I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it was literally a case of me and my best friend at school just went, well, let's go and work in a decent shop in Sheffield then. So
Okay.
she went to high class jewellers and I went to John Lewis, as
Nice.
it is now. It was Cole Brothers back then in Sheffield. Um, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't particularly enjoy retail.
Yeah.
So I applied for office jobs and I got an office job in a solicitor's, basically an office junior's role, still 16. Um, and they said to me, the managing partner called me in one day after I'd been there about 6 months and he just said, look, you're wasted. We're not going to be able to progress you. This is still like, get yourself back to college. My mum and dad had always expected me to be a teacher or a lawyer. I didn't want to do the university route.
Yeah.
So I went back to college and I trained to be a secretary because I still
Wow.
didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and then from there I got a job at an advertising agency. So
Okay, so
that's
that
where it
was your
started.
first. Okay, so you started at the advertising agency as a secretary.
No, so
Okay.
well, yes, sort of. I started on reception on what they classed as front of house
Okay.
because it was a very busy building.
Yeah.
Um, so it wasn't a case of sort of just answering the phone and greeting visitors. There was a lot more involved. But I started there. Their current PA to their two managing directors, they had a creative managing director and a business managing director, and their current PA moved to America. And I was given the job. And I stayed there for a good couple of years, and that's where I learnt all about copy and marketing and advertising and everything else. It was sort of, when I look back now, it was the foundation to what I'm doing now, realistically.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so you got your grounding in marketing and all things
yeah.
PR, and then you switched over to an architect's after that.
Yeah, so there was an advert in the local Sheffield paper
Yeah.
for a London architects wanting a PA to a partner.
Yeah.
And I just thought, why on earth would they put that in a Sheffield paper? So I applied. because I
Yeah.
was just so intrigued. Um, got the job, spent a little bit of time in London, and then they obviously knew that they were taking over from the original architects on Meadowhall. But obviously there was a handover period, which I didn't know
Okay.
anything about. So this is when I was in London.
Yeah.
And then I got shipped back up to Sheffield. So I worked in Kensington on Kensington High Street on a Monday and a Friday, and the busiest day for trains,
Yeah.
and Sheffield Tuesday to Thursday. While
Wow.
Meadow Hall was being built.
Wow. What an incredible journey you've been on, Claire. And so you came back to Sheffield, you
Yeah,
worked at the architects, you worked
yeah.
at helping to build Meadowhall. And how did your career progress once you were back in Sheffield?
So basically, then when Meadow Hall was finished, it was the option of go back to London or stay in Sheffield. And I'd sort of still got a life in Sheffield and not
Yeah.
got one in London. So I decided to stay. Um, so basically, I got a job. Let me think, where was next? I think I got a job at a white goods company. We sold washers and cookers and things into stores.
Yeah.
So I worked for the MD there for a little while. They then relocated to Scotland. I'd just bought a house in Sheffield,
Okay.
so there was no point in going to Scotland with them because, I'd only had my house about 2 months, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so then I went to work for a corporate debt collector, and that was a very interesting experience. Um, they demanded not a pound of flesh; they demanded your whole life,
Wow. Okay.
literally your whole life. They were quite proud of the fact actually that they'd take good people in, strip all the confidence, and keep them so they'd never leave.
Yeah.
Um, and I got to the point that I was going home and crying every single night. I
Yeah.
hated it that much. Um, so I went in to see the MD who I worked for one night after everybody had gone and just said, I can't carry on like this. And he said, well, you've got two choices. You carry on doing it or you leave. So I said, right, I go.
Good for you.
Um, he did give me the option of working for somebody else, but I didn't particularly like that person or how they operated. So I'd got a holiday coming up 6 weeks later. And so we agreed that if I'd not got a job, I would go on holiday and not come back. If I
Yeah.
had got a job, I could apply my normal notice period. Um, and that's when I moved to Sheffield University. I got a
Okay.
job there. So, yeah, so that was the next 16 years of my life.
Wow, 16 years.
Yeah.
And just remind us what your role was at Sheffield University.
Started as working for a guy called the academic secretary, which means
Hmm.
nothing to anybody outside the university. But basically was a head of one of the professional service divisions.
Okay.
So not linked to academic departments, but departments that supported them. So at that time, it was things like the print unit, the IT department, the secretariat, which, if anybody knows anything about universities, they run on committees.
Yeah.
The whole university structure is managed by committees. So he had a department that ran that. And so I worked for him. Then I got promoted to work for his boss as sort of more of I guess an administrator. I wasn't sort of doing diary work or anything. The guy that I was working for then had a personal assistant and a secretary.
Okay.
I was in addition to them, so I was doing sort of more admin
Yeah.
type work. Um, After a while, I got bored with that, so a job came up in admissions. So I went and ran the admissions office for taught admissions, not research admissions, for a little while.
Yeah.
Then a vacancy came up in the graduate research office,
Yeah.
and I applied for that and didn't get it, but somebody internal there got it, so I got their job.
Right.
So
Okay.
what I did, a lot of people say you shouldn't move if it's not a promotion. Every role I took was a sideways move, and then I got promoted within it.
Right. Okay.
And people couldn't understand that. But for me, it wasn't about having more money. It was about having a new challenge because I was
Yes.
getting a bit bored or whatever. Um, I ended up then being head of the graduate research office after 2 or 3 years.
Hmm.
And then we knew we'd be merged at some point. We were a very small department. There were only sort of, I think, 20, just over of us. And we knew we were either going to be put one way with student services who looked after all the taught students
Yeah.
in the uni, or we'd be moved into the research office, which looked after staff research.
Yes.
Um, and I always said jokingly, if we go to student services, I'll give it a try. If we go to the research office, I'll leave. That I always joked saying that, and then when it actually happened and we got moved to the research office, you sort of go, well, I've got to give it a go
Yeah.
because actually I can't just walk away. But it wasn't my sort of environment. They were very business focused, very financially focused.
Yeah.
A voluntary severance package came out. And it was the third one that had happened while I'd been at the university. And the
Yeah.
other two, I'd read the email and deleted it straight away.
Yeah.
And this one, I read it and marked it as new, marked it as unread. And I read
Okay.
it again and marked it as unread. And I kept doing that. And I eventually thought, this is your time.
There's a reason.
Um,
Yeah.
no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to be at the university. And it was a really good package. So I applied. Because I'd never picked my daughter up from school. She'd had to go to after school club every single day.
Yeah.
I felt I was missing out on a huge chunk of being a mum. And
Yes.
so that was my driving force for going. It was, I can actually now be a mum and maybe find something to work part time.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what I was going to do even when I signed the paper and said I was going.
That's incredibly brave, Claire. Incredibly brave thing to do. And so I guess what comes up for me when I think about your career history, it's like just been, a fantastic amount of skills and experience gathered along the way. But you've not particularly worked in many creative environments when what you do now and what you do so brilliantly is so creative.
No, but whatever role I took, so when I was in admissions,
Yeah.
I was designing the prospectus for university
Okay.
admissions.
I see.
So when I was at the graduate research office, we used to put conferences on. We used to have a newsletter, and so I was doing a lot of the things that I do now,
Yeah.
but on a different format, I guess.
Okay.
But wherever I've worked, even at the white goods company, I designed them a catalogue.
Yeah.
I wrote the adverts. So I did carry that learning from the advertising agency all the way through. It just wasn't as obvious part of my role.
Okay, yeah, I understand. And so
Yeah,
you took a leap of faith, you left your long-standing
I
career
did.
behind, and at that point Raspberry Flamingo was born. Is
No,
that no?
no, 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 no. We're back in 2008 or nine, I think, when I left the uni. I didn't know what to do, so I sat at home one day and I emailed friends from age 60 down to age 14, kids of my friends, and I said, "What should I do?
Yeah,
What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What should I do?" Um, and 3 or 4 people came back and went, "Well, you act as my therapist, so why don't you be a therapist?" And I thought, well, I've already got some counselling qualifications and I've done the mediation stuff. Let's have a look at that. Um, and I thought I can give myself a year. So I decided to follow that route. And I trained in all different types of therapy. So
okay,
I did clinical hypnotherapy, I did CBT, I did NLP, very intensively over a whole year.
yeah.
And I also worked part time at my daughter's after school club, which I loved. That was
That's
like a bit of a
incredible.
treat for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I actually opened a therapy clinic after a year.
Wow.
Um, and it went really, really well. I had a practice room within a tennis club in
Okay.
Sheffield, which was very quiet through the day. It was perfect. Um, and did really, really well. But we lost my mum,
Okay.
and I had to take 3 months off with my dad.
Yeah.
Um, and during that time, obviously, I'd referred my clients out to other therapists. So when I came back to it, bizarrely, my client base changed massively.
Yeah.
And whereas I'd been dealing with sort of what I'd call gentle everyday issues that people have before, I suddenly got clients with the deepest, darkest traumas.
Yeah.
I was hearing things that I couldn't even believe somebody writing a horror story would think up. I didn't
Okay.
think human beings were possible of even thinking these things and
Okay.
what they were doing to children. And it was just, I don't know how to put it really. It was difficult. And I found that I'd started looking at people differently.
Yeah.
So, if a dad was telling a kid off in a supermarket, my brain went to places it shouldn't have gone
Okay.
about what was happening in that family.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I can't do this long term, full time. So, as well as the deep, dark traumas of these adults that had abuse as children that I was dealing with, I was also working with teenagers.
Right.
And I actually really enjoyed that. So I decided to drop the therapy down to part-time and just stay with the teenagers.
Okay.
So I did that, and the week I decided to do that, I got a call from somebody I used to work with at the university. And one of the things we'd done at the university for research students was run training courses, because they're so specialised, they forget they've got transferable skills.
Okay.
So I'd done a bit of train the trainer type things, and I'd put on some courses and various things. And this person said, I'm now working for a spin out company at the university and we need some training. Would you develop us and deliver us some courses? So I thought, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? So I started doing some bespoke training work. And then I got picked up by a sales training company who trained globally. And they trained huge companies like Google and Siemens and people like that. And I started delivering some of their courses.
Yeah.
And their courses were 3 days and you got paid incredibly well. And so actually delivering 2 courses a month, I didn't need to do any other work.
Yeah.
Um, and it got to the point that I lost myself.
Yeah.
I just didn't know who I was or what. I'd never really known what I wanted to do, but I'd always enjoyed what I'd done.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'm delivering somebody else's material. I wasn't particularly enjoying what I was doing in a way, and then I wasn't doing anything else.
Yeah.
So a change had to come. So I said to my now husband, what do I do? And he said, what did you want to do growing up? I said, I wanted to be Linda Barker. He went, well, be Linda Barker then. So I
I love
retrained
that.
again and set up an interior design and decorating company,
Yeah.
which I adored. But I adored it because me and my team did the decorating. I was part of the decorating team as well as the
Okay.
design. I wasn't just running the business and doing the design. I was physically changing these spaces.
Yeah.
And I absolutely adored it. I thought I'd be doing that until I could physically not do it anymore.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
fell off a ladder.
Yes. So this podcast is all about twists and turns and those life-changing moments. And it sounds like you've had a lot. And you know what I've taken from everything that you've just told me is that you've kind of just surrendered to whatever life thrown at you. And I think that's just incredible.
That's one way of looking at
Like
it.
there's no other words that I can find that just absolutely incredible. Like you're just so open to new opportunities. Like, yeah, why not? Let's give it a go. And you've just had these incredible experiences because of it. So you set up your interior design. You finally living out your Linda Barker dream, and then you fell off a ladder. So that, would you say that was one of those moments?
That was probably the biggest life-changing moment
Yeah,
because I have life-changing injuries.
yeah,
Um, I've had, I couldn't walk. I had one of those external fixator frames on for 16 months and I couldn't walk unaided for those 16 months
okay,
because of the severity of the breaks in my left leg. I'd got an inch of bone to regrow in both my tibia and my fibia.
Wow.
And it took a good 16 months
Yeah.
and 7 operations. Um, and I've had to grieve for my mobility. And I didn't for the first probably 2.5 years because I kept thinking I'd get better.
Yeah.
And I can walk short distances now, as you know. Anything longer than sort of, I don't know, a 2-minute walk, I have to use my walking stick.
Okay.
But then I can walk for perhaps 20 minutes with my
Yeah.
walking stick before it gets too painful. So I'm mobile, I'm walking. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. I learned to do things in little stints. So, when you go on holiday and you go out for a walk, I can only do a little walk and then I've got to sit and have a coffee or something.
Yeah.
Um, we don't go to hotels anymore because I have to elevate my leg for long periods of time. And so
Right.
in a hotel room, I feel like I'm always sat on the bed.
Yeah.
So we tend to book a cottage or something like that where I've got a living space. I can actually feel like I'm sat in a living room reading a magazine or something.
Yeah.
So it's just been adjustments. Um,
Adjustments. Yeah. And like
yeah,
you
but
said, grieving, I suppose, for a version of you that doesn't exist
yes,
anymore. Yeah.
it never entered my head that I'd needed to grieve.
Yeah.
I can't walk in the countryside with my dogs anymore.
Yeah.
Things that I really, really loved doing.
Yeah.
Trees are my thing. I love being around trees.
Yeah.
And so I love walking through woods and things like that. I can't do that now. Um, and I don't think it was till after I grieved that I realised that's the process I'd gone through.
Yes. Yeah.
But as I say, I'm working, I'm mobile, I've got a fantastic life.
Yeah.
It's slowed me down, it's made me look at things differently. There's a lot of good come from it. A lot of good come from it.
Yeah. And I think those life-changing moments, usually a lot of good does come from them, but it never feels like it at the time. So
Yeah.
so you mentioned that you were like 16 months off your feet. That's a long, long period of time. I mean, initially after the accident, how did that period look like? I'm assuming that it was
So
quite challenging and,
yeah,
yeah.
so in about the October, November before my frame came off in the December,
Hmm.
I started thinking about what I was going to do next. Um, I knew, all right, well, I didn't know how mobile I'd be, so I knew I couldn't. I'd sold the decorating business to the main guy that worked for me.
Okay. Okay.
Um, he wanted me to carry on with the interior design and that's that and getting the clients, and he would look after the decorating side, but I couldn't bring myself to separate them. I
Yeah.
loved doing them both, and so I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. When I first had the accident, I got clients coming. I was living at my dad's bungalow because I needed a downstairs room, and I got clients coming and putting wallpaper and paint samples all over the bed to discuss their themes with me, and I was
Oh,
just like, I can't. I know this isn't what I want to do. I don't
yeah.
just want to do that bit. Um, so I started thinking about what I wanted to do, and I thought, right, look back at all my jobs. What are the elements I've really loved doing?
Yeah.
And when I look back, it was the writing. And when I thought back to my childhood, I was that kid that wrote a note to somebody and put it through the letterbox rather than ringing them up.
Yeah.
I've always written letters. I've always, I went on a creative writing course when I was still very young. Um, and so I thought, okay, let's have a look at this. So because I'd got a network, I'd done networking with the decorating and things,
Yeah.
I set up a little WhatsApp group with some business owners and said, this is the stage I'm at. This is what I'm thinking about doing. Would you, as a small business owner, need my services?
Yeah.
And I got work.
Wow.
Just couldn't do it. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was still on too much medication to actually work. But yeah, so that's how it started. And when I went back to that networking event and their events, they just treated me like I'd never done anything else.
Yeah.
They were just so fantastic with me. I can never thank those people enough.
Yeah.
And I'd been away for 18 months. They introduced me to all the new members. And it was just incredible. And it started from there, and then lockdown hit, and all
Yes.
these companies were sat at home going, I can't go out to work. What do I do? Oh, I'll look at my website. I'll look at my marketing.
Yeah.
And it exploded. Raspberry Flamingo exploded.
Yeah, there's been a good few businesses that I've spoke to that, I suppose what the stereotype of lockdown is looking like now, that businesses went downhill, that it actually, quite a few people, it shifted and it changed, and it was
Yeah,
a positive thing for business in general.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow, Claire. I mean, I have no words. You're just an incredible person. Like, I mean, I am looking at you thinking, wow, how resilient you are, and how you can always just pivot and change and turn, negatives into positives. Did you surprise yourself of how resilient you were in those
I,
moments?
I don't think you think about it in those terms. I think because I've never really known what I wanted to do,
Yeah,
I've never had this career plan.
yeah,
And so the pivots and the changes that you talk about just seem like an opportunity to me.
yeah.
Um, and that's how I'm not a very structured. Well, you you run my business for me, Elaine. I'm not the most structured person in the world. um, I like to do what I want to do when I want to do it,
Yeah,
and I have to force myself to do things to a schedule. So
yes,
I guess really that's just me. That's who I am.
yeah,
I think I've just gone, oh, I'm bored of this now. What's next?
yeah.
Or oh, I can't do that anymore. What do I do?
Okay.
Um, and that I think that's just me. So it's not felt like. I mean, obviously the accident was huge.
Yes.
I can't knock that down. But coming out of it, what I decided to do was just let's give it a go.
Yeah.
And who knew it'd work?
Who knew? Well, I think everybody that knows you probably would have known. Yeah. Okay, so after everything you've been through, your incredible career, all your surrendering to life's opportunities moments, and those moments that have changed your path, how has that affected how you run your business today, and how you look at life?
I think I look at things very differently to a lot of business owners. I'm as I say, I'm not particularly structured. I don't look at competition and what they're doing.
Yeah.
I've once looked up what other people charged. That's
Okay.
that's it. I looked at pricing structures once. Um, because I'm not interested in what anybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And I know some people would say that's really arrogant or that's a massive downfall. You should know what's happening in your industry. But I'm not interested because
Yeah.
my clients want to work with me and Raspberry Flamingo. They don't want to work with somebody else in the industry. So I don't see them as competition.
Yeah.
Um, I, when I see somebody who's very determined and very structured, part of me goes, wow, I wish I was more like that. And the other part of me goes, chill out, you
Yes.
know?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And it's sort of that conflict because you're told all the time you should have your goals, you should have your business plan, you should have your 90-day plan, you should be working to that. And I've tried it. I have many
Yeah.
times. And I even stuck to a 90-day plan for 3 weeks. Um, doesn't equal 90 days, but I stuck to it for 3 weeks. Um, so I don't know. I just think do whatever works for you.
Yes.
All these business coaches that say get up at 5 o'clock and do an hour's meditation, an hour in the gym, and sod that. Stay in bed if you want to stay in bed and start work at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Do what fits you as a person.
Yes.
I knew, as you're aware, I got to a point with Raspberry Flamingo that I knew that if I continued to run it as I was, there would be a problem because I'm not structured enough. There
Yeah.
weren't enough systems and procedures in place. And that's where you came in. You've systemized the whole business for me.
I
I
did.
still to this day run it when I'm not around and when I am around most of the time. I needed what I learnt was I needed somebody who could do that because I
Yes.
can't.
Yeah.
And it was silly of me trying to force myself to be something that I'm not.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more about that absolute last statement. Trying to force yourself to be something that you're not. And so I see so many people trying to do that every day.
Yeah,
Yeah, fitting into these boxes that we think
yeah,
we should be. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, for me, a good business coach doesn't tell you how to do something. A good business coach gets you as you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
But so many of these coaches, and I apologise if I'm upsetting anybody listening to this, but so many of these coaches dictate what you should do with your business.
Yes,
And nobody should dictate what you do with your business. It's your business.
it
If
is.
you're the sort of person who wants a prescriptive coach, go for it.
Yeah.
There are people that need that, want that, and thrive on that. I'm just not one of those people. And so my message is, if you're not one of those people, don't do it.
Yeah.
Find
Yeah.
your own way.
Absolutely. I agree. I think it's, yeah, I think that knowing the knowledge that you can take all these little bits of advice and guidance and mutate it into something that's unique for you, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have an exciting new project starting in April that I need to talk to you about, because
Okay, tell
there's
me
a
about this.
whole load of new systemization and management needed. I just
Okay.
thought I'd drop that on you today.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Claire. That sounds exciting. You know me, I always geek out over a new system. So yeah, I
Yeah, no,
do.
it is exciting actually. I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay, do you want to share us some little news or do you want to leave us on a
No,
cliffhanger? Leave us on a
no,
cliffhanger.
no. It's just going to be really, really special.
Okay. And so, I mean, what comes through loud and clear, Claire, is that you've always, I suppose you feel comfortable with who you are and what you want. You know, you don't set these really high expectations that you have to fit into this mold. I mean, I'm interested to know where that came from. Is that, your upbringing, or did you just always have that?
I think because I have a brother who's 10 years older than me,
Yeah,
and he went to university when I was 8,
right. Okay.
and he put very high expectations on himself,
Yeah,
and my parents put quite high expectations on him, and he wasn't the sort of teenager who was out with his mates. He was
yeah,
at home doing his homework and studying, and I was the type of teenager that wanted to be out with the mates.
yeah,
And because the expectations were that I would do A levels, that I would go to university, and I have been to university. I've got a master's degree now in communication studies. I've done that part
yeah,
time later on. Um, I think I just rebelled. I think I just rebelled against all the expectations of
yeah,
me. Um, Yeah, and so I didn't know where I wanted to go. Had mum said, yes, you can go to Manchester and do this interior design course, who knows what would have happened.
yeah.
She's probably done me the biggest favour ever by saying no to that, because I wouldn't be who I am had I done that. I'd have been
No,
something very different, you know. And I've not always been comfortable with myself. I've not always had the best of times, Personally, we all go through parts of life where we're insecure or bad things happen and you blame yourself, or,
yeah,
all those things have happened. I'm not going to go into my personal drama and sagas.
no.
Um, but I think, I've got to an age, I'm mid-50s, I've got to an age where I just think, so what? You know, if something goes wrong, it wasn't meant to be. That's fine. Let's do something else.
And that's a whole new
Um,
level of freedom, I think, Claire.
yeah, and I'm a firm believer that the energy we put out is the energy we get back.
Absolutely.
So if
Yes.
anything negative happens, I always think, what have I done to bring that on,
Yeah.
and try and change it up. You know, and again, some people go, that's woo woo, that's ridiculous. But that's what I believe, and it works for me.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're not into the spiritual world, it can be quite logical as well that every decision that you made did lead to this thing. So,
Absolutely.
reviewing it, looking at it that way. And that's not
Yeah.
always an easy pill to swallow, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
No. But you've got to take ownership and responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, I've brought my daughter up, and I tell everybody, you know, there's only us in our own heads.
Yes.
We're not our parents, we're not our siblings, we're not anybody else. We are in charge of what we think and what we do.
Yeah.
And if you take that responsibility, I think you're far happier.
I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay, Claire. So, last question. So, from everything that you've experienced, the incredible life that you've lived to date, is there one piece of advice that you would share with everyone?
If it doesn't make you happy, get out of doing it as quickly as you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is, yeah, powerful, powerful message.
Yeah.
Claire, I have so enjoyed this chat. I really have. You are just an amazing lady. And yeah, I've got nothing but respect for you and everything that you do. So thank you so much for your
Oh,
time today.
thank you for having me on.